What would you do if your job required you to watch someone die? For $500 a day, this is the reality for those working behind the screens of the dark web. You might think it sounds like a fictional plot from a crime thriller, but for some, it's a job that pays the bills. What happens when the line between right and wrong blurs, and you're forced to question your role in a world of shadows? Welcome to the terrifying world of those who watch people die on the dark web. The dark web. A hidden layer of the internet, where everything that's supposed to be invisible thrives. It's a place that attracts the curious, the desperate, and the dangerous. A place where people can disappear without a trace, where illegal markets run rampant, and where human lives can be bought, sold, and discarded like objects. For most people, it's a place of fear, a place that exists only in whispers and warnings. But for some, it's just another job. That's where I found myself. On the edge of curiosity and necessity. I'd been struggling, living paycheck to paycheck, trapped in the cycle of rent, bills, and the never-ending grind of daily survival. I needed a way out. A chance to break free. Then I stumbled across the job posting, sitting innocently in my inbox like it was meant for me. The offer was direct, no fancy words, just a simple promise: monitor live streams, report any illegal activity, and collect data. $500 a day. Remote work. At first, it felt like a godsend. The kind of thing you'd read about in those easy money clickbait articles. No experience required, no qualifications to meet, just the willingness to watch, to monitor, to report. It sounded too good to pass up. For someone like me, living paycheck to paycheck, $500 a day was enough to change everything. The job was described as a security measure. The company was supposedly protecting the public by monitoring live streams for illegal activities. You weren't expected to be involved in anything criminal, you were simply observing. If anything suspicious was detected, you'd report it to a higher authority. Simple, right? You don't pull the trigger. You're just the eyes. But the details? Sparse. There were no names, no specifics about the company, just an anonymous email address and a link to a portal where you'd sign in. The contract was as vague as the ad itself, yet the terms were clear: no questions, no hesitations. You follow the feeds, you report what you see, and you get paid. The rest was irrelevant. What happened after you sent your report was none of your concern. So, I took the job. I logged in, ready to begin my new life, watching streams from all corners of the world. But this wasn't the type of job I expected. In the beginning, everything seemed harmless enough. Streams of street markets, empty rooms, nature documentaries. But as the days went on, the content grew darker, more twisted. The streams showed people in desperate situations, scenes of abuse, violence, and suffering. Sometimes, it was hard to tell if these were real or staged, but the fear, the pain, it felt so real. I thought I was just the watcher, just the one reporting. But I wasn't prepared for what would happen when the feeds took a darker turn. Each time I clicked on a new stream, I felt a pang of dread. The temptation to look away grew, but I couldn't. And that was the problem. I couldn't look away. This wasn't just a job anymore. It was a descent into something much darker. Something I couldn't escape. Something I was complicit in, whether I wanted to be or not. Every night, the streams begin. It starts like clockwork. At exactly 9 p.m., a new feed appears on the screen, clear, crisp, almost clinical in its presentation. But as soon as you're in the feed, the sense of dread starts to creep in. A man bound to a chair, his eyes wide with terror, struggling against ropes that cut into his skin. A blood-stained floor, dark and sticky, reflecting the dim light that flickers overhead. Masked figures move in and out of frame, their intentions hidden, their actions a slow, methodical dance that makes my stomach twist. The footage is always the same, scenes of torment, suffering, and violence. Sometimes the man in the chair is screaming, begging for mercy. Other times, he's eerily silent, his breathing shallow, like he's already given up. The workers, the ones who watch and report, are known only as watchers. That's what I am now, just another cog in the machine. Hired to oversee these grotesque feeds, to confirm what's happening, and then to submit my report. No questions, no hesitations. For us, it's a job. Just a job. Job. That's what they told us when they hired us. We're the neutral party, the ones who don't get involved. We just observe and report. Detach. But how can you detach from what you're seeing? How can you remain detached when you know that what's happening on that screen is real? Those are real people, real lives unraveling in front of your eyes, and I'm complicit in watching it. For a paycheck. Some of the more seasoned watchers say it's just part of the job. You get used to it, they tell me. It's a way to keep your sanity intact. They act as if it's nothing, as if the screams and pleas for help are just background noise, like static. They've learned to detach. But no matter how much I try to tell myself it's just work, it's hard not to question the reality of what's happening. How many lives are being ruined behind those cameras? How many people are experiencing their final moments as we sit there, numb, typing out our reports, hitting submit, and moving on to the next feed? Are we really that different from the ones pulling the strings, from the ones who created these horrors? The question gnaws at me every time I log in. The feeds have become more twisted, more disturbing with each passing night. The people in these streams, they aren't actors. They aren't pretending. The fear is real. The desperation is real. I can hear it in their voices, in their pleas, in the way they tremble as they wait for the next thing to happen. And every night, I sit there. I watch. I report. But I can't help but wonder, how much longer can I keep doing this before I become just like the ones who created it? Before I lose myself completely in the horror? How many more lives will be destroyed before the truth comes out? Before it's too late to stop it? The world is never as simple as it seems. And in this twisted landscape, everyone has their own perspective on the Watchers. Some see the Watchers as heroes, duty-bound to stop illegal activities before they escalate further. They view themselves as the last line of defense against the unspeakable horrors unfolding on the other side of the screen. They tell themselves that by reporting the live feeds, they're doing their part to prevent further deaths, to alert authorities before someone is lost for good. In their minds, they're saving lives, protecting the innocent from the chaos they watch unfold, believing their role is critical to bringing an end to these atrocities. They see themselves as guardians of justice, and perhaps in some twisted way, they are. They make their reports, The room is silent except for the occasional crack of metal, chains being pulled tight, the sound of something larger moving just out of frame. You try to focus on the figure, but your attention is drawn to the shadows, the movements just beyond the reach of the camera. Figures, masked and faceless, lurking in the dark. They circle around him like vultures, their silhouettes merging with the shadows, their footsteps silent but heavy. They don't speak. They don't need to. You want to scream. You want to look away. But you can't. You're trapped in this digital void, just like the man on the screen. There are no sounds to his screams, just the distortion of muffled cries, swallowed by the static in the feed. You can't hear the pain, but you can feel it. It pulses through the screen, thick and suffocating, as though the very air is heavy with terror. His mouth moves, his face contorts in agony, but there's nothing, no sound to match the horror unfolding. The feed glitches, a brief flash of static before the picture stabilizes again. The man's face is now streaked with tears, sweat glistening on his forehead, his eyes glazed with the terror of knowing what's coming. His cries are trapped in a world where no one can reach them. The shadows close in around him, and the light flickers once more, casting his desperate face in long, haunting angles. As you sit there, watching this unfold, the darkness feels like it's creeping in around you, suffocating you. It's not just the room that's dark. It's the moral void, the space between right and wrong, that consumes you, too. The screen is a window into a nightmare, but the horror isn't confined to the image. It seeps into your mind, into your thoughts, and you begin to question, how much of this are you really watching? How much of it are you complicit in? And as the video continues, you realize you can't escape the darkness. It surrounds you, both physically and morally, in a place where no one can hear your screams. The tension builds with each passing night, each new stream that flashes on the screen. The content grows more intense, more visceral. At first, there's the disgust, the shock of seeing something so vile, so grotesque that it feels like it can't possibly be real. But then, like an unwelcome guest, fascination creeps in. You can't look away. The images burn themselves into your mind, each moment more horrifying than the last, and yet you find yourself unable to stop watching. The line between repulsion and intrigue blurs, and what once seemed unthinkable becomes routine. But what happens when you become a part of the darkness? When the fascination turns into a kind of sick compulsion, and you find yourself checking in on these streams without even questioning why? The real horror, though, isn't just the violence you witness. It's the nagging sense of complicity that settles deep within you. The realization that you're not just an observer, you're part of a system that enables these atrocities to continue. You report. You watch. You stay silent. Each click, each report, each second spent staring at the screen feels like an unspoken agreement to be an accomplice to the horror unfolding before you. At first, you try to push away the thoughts, telling yourself that you're just doing your job. You're only the eyes, someone else will stop it. But as the days go on, the weight of your inaction becomes unbearable. You see the same faces, the same terror, and each time, you feel more trapped. The people on the screen aren't just victims, they're real people, with lives and families, and you're doing nothing to help them. Every watcher eventually faces the same question: can you live with yourself knowing what you've seen? When you close your eyes at night, do the images follow you into your dreams? When you wake, are you haunted by the faces of those you couldn't save? Can you truly walk away, knowing that the darkness you've witnessed has now become a part of you? Can you forget the faces of the terrified, the pleading, the broken? Can you convince yourself that you've done no wrong, when every click, every report, was a moment you chose not to act? But there's no easy answer. There's no simple escape. The longer you remain, the harder it becomes to separate yourself from what you've seen. The guilt gnaws at you, an incessant reminder that you were there, watching, powerless to stop it. And the worst part? You know it's never truly over. Even if you leave, the darkness will follow you, creeping into every corner of your mind, whispering that you're just as guilty as the ones who pulled the trigger. The question remains, can you ever walk away without being consumed by guilt? Or has the darkness already taken hold of you? Law enforcement agencies have ramped up efforts to crack down on dark web activities in recent years. They've implemented sophisticated measures, from enhanced encryption techniques to increased surveillance, in an attempt to track and dismantle these underground networks. Investigations are launched, and raids are executed with precision. In some cases, entire dark web marketplaces have been taken down, their servers dismantled, and the criminals behind them arrested. But despite these efforts, the problem persists. The nature of the dark web makes it difficult to completely eradicate these heinous practices. As one network falls, another takes its place, like a hydra with an endless supply of heads to replace the ones that are severed. Solutions are put forward: stronger encryption, global cooperation, new cybersecurity tools to track these transactions, but they're not enough to stop the demand. The sick fascination with these feeds, the need to watch others suffer for entertainment, is an insidious force that's far harder to eliminate. As long as there's an audience, the streams will continue. The appetite for violence and voyeurism seems insatiable, feeding the very system that has so deeply scarred so many of those involved. And then there's the psychological toll on the watchers. It's undeniable. The faces of the victims, the sounds of their screams, the moral weight of simply watching, it wears on the mind. Some watchers, unable to bear the burden any longer, have started to speak out, revealing the impact the job has had on their lives. They tell stories of nightmares, of waking up in a cold sweat, unable to shake the images. They describe the sense of guilt, of becoming numb to human suffering, and the struggle to remain detached. Many report deteriorating mental health, and some have even left the job, unable to cope with the realization that they've been complicit in something so monstrous. These watchers, now desperate to find a way out of the darkness, urge for better regulation and oversight. They call for stricter laws to prevent access to these types of streams, for mental health support for those who have been exposed to this trauma, and for more efforts to track down the criminals behind these networks. But with the anonymity the dark web provides, tracking and prosecuting these criminals seems nearly impossible. The veil of secrecy is one of its greatest defenses, and the illegal activities are often conducted in a way that makes identification and arrest an uphill battle. It's clear that more needs to be done. Solutions need to go beyond simply taking down networks or enforcing laws. They need to address the root of the problem, the demand for violence and suffering. Until that appetite is curbed, the streams will continue, and the cycle will repeat. As the Watchers call for reform, one truth remains: while the dark web may be a world of shadows, the lasting scars it leaves on those who glimpse into it are all too real. Moving forward, it's a question of how society handles the allure of voyeurism and the human cost of those who are forced to watch. How much longer can we turn a blind eye before the darkness consumes us all? In a world where people can live in the shadows, untethered from the consequences of their actions, what happens to those who choose to watch? Knowing full well they can never unsee the horrors they witness. The dark web is a space where humanity's darkest desires are brought into the light, but it's also a mirror reflecting the moral complexities of those who stand on the other side, observing. For those who take on the role of watcher, the line between observer and participant becomes dangerously thin. With each new stream, with each new life they bear witness to, they're faced with the unanswerable question: how much are they willing to witness before it becomes too much? The dark web offers a chilling glimpse into the deepest parts of human depravity, but it also compels us to confront a much deeper issue: the morality of those who watch, who do nothing but observe. What does it say about us as a society when we allow this to persist? When we can sit behind a screen, safely distant from the reality unfolding, and not feel the need to act, to intervene, to stop the suffering? The question isn't just about what's happening in the shadows, it's about what happens to us when we look into them. As the boundaries between right and wrong become more blurred, as the role of the watcher becomes more entwined with that of the participant, one question echoes louder than all the rest: how much do we really want to know? And perhaps even more haunting, how far will we go to turn a blind eye to the things we can't ignore? We live in a time when access to the darkest corners of the world is just a click away. The question is no longer whether we can look away, but whether we should, and whether, in doing so, we are complicit in allowing the darkness to persist. The weight of that choice is something that those who watch will carry with them, long after the screens go dark. And for the rest of us, the chilling thought remains: how long can we continue to ignore the shadows without becoming part of them? What do you think? Is watching these crimes on the dark web just another part of the job? Or are those behind the screens equally responsible for the horrors they witness? Leave your thoughts in the comments below.